What dudes? I'm the Metal Monkey. Welcome to the Monkey Cave. Welcome to the first Desert Dimes video cast. I'm going to show you some examples of welding, some of my tips, and see if we can't get the ball rolling for you to pick up a new welder and go have some fun with your truck. Hopefully in future episodes we'll have some guests from around the Desert Dimes community to show some of their tips and tricks. But today we're going to start with mine. Well, since your welder comes from the factory with recommended settings inside the door, I'm going to tell you just go ahead and start with those. After that, you're going to get a feel for it. There's several things that you're going to be looking for and listening for, and I'll explain those later on. But for now, just start right there. One of the more basic things we'll start with is your gas. Here I'm running 75% carbon dioxide, 25% argon. Now, when you're setting the pressure for your gas line to come out of your MIG nozzle, you're looking at anywhere from about 10 CFM up to 25 CFM, depending on whether you're indoors you want to keep it low, outdoors you might have to turn it up. I don't recommend going over 25 CFM though, because then you'll create turbulence at the end of your MIG gun and you can actually introduce contaminants into your weld. The next thing I'd like to show you guys, MIG gun. Pretty standard stuff. You have a trigger, neck, then you have the important parts. Your electrode, your wire, and here you have a gas shielding cup. One of the more important tricks that I found with your gas shielding cup is you want your electrode to be either flush or slightly protruding from your gas cup. So don't be afraid to take this piece over to the grinder and let's grind it down. Another quick little trick, always have a pair of pliers handy. Because after every time you weld, you're going to end up with a little ball on the end of your wire. Cleanliness is next to godliness when it comes to welding. Pretty much everything that you do needs to be clean, including the wire from the end of your gun to the pieces that you're going to fuse. So before we get too far ahead and start making the flashy light, I just want to throw down a little bit of chicken scratch for you. When you first pull the trigger and you strike your arc, you're already going to be creating a circle. A lot of people talk about C's or Z patterns, this and that. Most of them will end with similar results as long as you have your settings right and you have smooth, consistent movements with your hand. But the more important thing is anticipating what the puddle is going to do and manipulating just the end of your gun to create either the C pattern or the Z pattern. So you want to start with your round circle, and from there you want to manipulate it from one side of your workpiece to the other. Small movements are important for creating a nice clean weld. And there's your C pattern. Another thing you're going to be listening for, like I spoke of earlier, is the gun, when you pull the trigger, is going to create a snapping noise. And the more consistent that snapping noise is, the better your weld is probably going to end up. If you hear a sputter or a stutter or any of those things, it means you're having issues. Check your grounding, check your wire, check your temperature, check your wire speed. All those things play an important role. But when they all come together, that's when you'll start making magic. So I've showed you some of the basics. We've talked about it, threw down some chicken scratch. It all comes down to the old adage, practice, practice, practice. You can go to your metal suppliers, you can buy remnants relatively cheap, you can grab stuff from around the house, pull the trigger on it. Start with some small projects before you actually get started on your truck. But if you just practice, eventually you'll start to hear and see some of the things that I'm talking about. You guys ready to make some flashy light or what? Watch. So I'm going to start with what's called a lap joint. Consider this a flat surface and this a flat surface laying on top of the other one. So you'll want to aim for what would be considered the thicker material, which would be this lower flat surface here. And you want to push your weld bead up onto the other surface, the opposing face. Again, you'll want to listen for the snap that I was speaking of earlier and watch the slow manipulation of the puddle. And you should end with a result similar to that. Now when it comes to welding tubes together, you always want to put your initial tack somewhere in an unnoticeable spot, and you don't want to put it in the middle of where you want to pass. So you either go to the top here or the back side here. That way you can make one complete pass in one smooth motion. Definitely ends up with better aesthetical results. Now, I find myself in a slightly uncomfortable position trying to accommodate the camera. Again, pre-run your weld and then give it your best shot. And as you can see, got a little out of position, so it's not the prettiest thing, especially that guy right there at the end, which is actually kind of upside down, which might be hard to tell, but that's essentially what you're going for. Cut the little balls off. Tack in an inconspicuous spot. Now, of course, for the sake of the camera, it's a little boogery around here as I was in a very difficult position. But hopefully you got to see the consistency that you're looking for. Not the best example, but one that works. Of course, you would have started here and moved around, but just for my example's sake, there you go. So you always want to make your weld pass as long as possible. If you're going to tack it here, you want to be able to travel all the way around to the other side. Of course, it started to get away from me at the very end there, so I do got one little booger. But what you're looking for is somewhat smooth consistency. Sometimes you may feel it necessary to pre-run your weld. Just take the gun and follow the direction you're going to be to make sure that you're going to end up comfortable the entire time. Yep, looks like I can pull that off. Tack it on each end. And then lay it down. And something like that should be your end result. As you'll see, I got a little bit of spatter around the outsides, which means I still need to adjust my settings a little bit better than you're looking for. Not necessarily waving your hand, but moving in a repetitive and consistent pattern, watching your weld bead, and anticipating what the flow is going to do. And just for the hell of it, we're going to go ahead and lay down another bead. So again, let me stress the importance of proper setup on your welder, consistency in your pattern, and being relaxed. And one thing to remember when you're manipulating your pattern, it's already round, so you just want to control the flow. You want to move in smooth, comfortable arcs, producing a consistent pattern. And back to the old pen and paper, I guess. What I wanted to show you is when you create your weld bead, like I said, you have a full circle. As you weld more and more, you'll start to notice finer and finer details about your weld. And what you want to initially do is keep your wire inside of the fluid portion of your weld bead, and that'll keep it smooth and consistent. If you move too fast and your wire goes outside of your puddle, it's going to cause a stutter. Well, Desert Dimers, that's about all I have to show you. If you can think of anything that I've missed, or you'd like to see something else a little more in depth, PM me on the board and we'll include it in future video casts. Hopefully in the next few episodes we'll have some other guests from around the Desert Dimes community, show you some electrical tips, maybe some motor tips, other things that are pertinent to your truck. So right on, you guys. Have a good one.